We need red. Oh, actually, got a lot of concretes in there. That's good. Just keep mining random stuff. Just keep getting us stocked on it.
Captain, that is what I do best.
How do I do these slabs? How do I make these slabs?
I got you some over here, Nikki. Hold on. I'm just gonna craft you them and throw them on you, okay?
Yeah, thank you.
There you go. That should
Oh,
be
I
enough.
can fly? Oh my god.
That should be enough. That should be. Yeah, you can fly.
Thank you.
Oh.
What else? What am I missing?
You
Oh, I
missed.
built it the wrong.
Yeah, it needs to be like forward one. This.
Tubbo, where's the black glazed terracotta? Oh, you got it.
In the chest by your build.
Yep. Thank you. Got it. All right. Let's see. Just spruce and stone. Is there spare stone?
Concrete? I threw it all in the
Yes,
thing.
there is. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I just need to smelt a little bit. Okay, and then more spruce.
Anybody need any flowers?
Now that we've helped people customize and save with Liberty Mutual, we can finally do some beach reading.
Yes, red tulip.
Right.
Just say a block you need and I'll get it.
I don't need any colored stuff right now, but
So just anything.
I actually think I have everything I need already here, which is nice. Trapdoors.
Oh god.
Yellow.
Oh, got it. Okay. Tubbo.
Yeah?
Ah,
Oh wait.
What do you need?
Let me quickly check what I have. I need an iron block.
Iron block?
Yep.
Yay!
No, I got a crochet wood. Yeah, iron block.
Are you sure there's not iron block in the chest? I put some in the chest. Look.
Yeah, maybe it's
red
oh,
tulip.
Yeah, I got one.
You putting it in?
Ah.
Yeah, hold on. I just want to get this done.
I just need that. That's all I need is the red
okay,
tulip.
look, Yeah.
Okay.
I got it. That's it.
Oh, thank you.
Something's wrong?
Oh my God, is it?
I'm gonna
full block,
focus on
probably?
sabotage now, boys.
Jesus.
Okay.
It was shown as slabs. But it wasn't. That's incredible. Okay, let's see. Do we have everything? I hope we have every kind of color in here.
We do.
Wait.
Wait, we don't have white. We don't have white.
Oh no, we don't. Oh God.
There's a gate? There's no gate? Oh, there is. Oh, my God, there's a
Captain,
gate.
I can't get it in time, Captain.
Oh my God, I didn't know there was a gate.
Oh, no, it's okay. We get partial points.
My ears hurt from listening to the Terror Scoop 4 soundtrack. Hey, Nikki, you didn't. It's okay.
Did I get it? No, I didn't. I right-clicked. Ah!
Oh my God, they got 4,000 points. What? How did they get 4,000 points?
Holy shit.
Yeah,
Man.
that's crazy.
I hate this game.
It's all good, dude.
No. Good game. Bad players.
Wow, blue on top.
That's true. Guys, don't worry. We can still bring it back.
Yeah, we can.
No,
Oh,
actually,
yeah, for
that's
sure,
just
dude.
not true. That's
No,
just,
we can get 4,000 points in a single round, 100%. We've got this.
Let's play
I
survival
believe.
games, guys. That's the only way we can.
It actually gave me an incorrect display. Like it showed slabs on the template, and you had to do a full block.
Oh.
Yeah.
Writing's not that easy, but Grammarly can help. This sentence is grammatically correct, but it's wordy and hard to read. It undermines the writer's message, and the word choice is bland. Grammarly's cutting-edge
All right, everybody, welcome back to Software Gore. Speaking of which, a few minutes ago when I initiated this recording for the first time, as soon as I hit the record key, my computer crashed. Like all the USB ports just stopped working. So I felt that was kind of fitting, right? Given the subreddit. Anyway, this video is brought to you by our sponsors, the like button. YouTube occasionally has bugs and glitches, so you should test out the like button, make sure it's working, and also QCathletics.com for quality content hats. If you're interested, check it out. They're pretty slick. Link in the description. Let's start off with number 19. Go to Germany or stay in Germany. I can't decide. Update store. You are browsing in the Germany store. Please return to your home store and restart your task. Go to Germany, stay in Germany. This is a very hard decision. To Germany or to Germany? That is the question. What are they trying to say? I can't browse the Germany store if I want to? So if I don't want to browse the Germany store, you don't want me to? I have to go to Germany or stay there instead? Not really giving me a whole lot of options here, huh? Are you now? Not very nice of you. Not very good hospitality to try to boot me out to the same store. I opened Hulu, and it's been stuck like this. Hank Hill's watching. Is he supposed to be blue there? Is that part of the graphic, or did the color shift when it opened up, and that's a bug in and of itself? I used to have a thing when I would turn on my Game Boy Color, and every now and again it would completely shift the color palette of the whole thing. And I still have never gotten an answer as to whether or not that was a feature on the Game Boy Color, or if I had a uniquely bugged Game Boy Color and I should have held on to it and then sold it for millions of dollars. Imagine how much someone would be willing to pay for a Game Boy Color that would occasionally shift the entire color palette on you with some strange bug. It was really cool though, because every time I got a different color palette than I had seen in the past, I was like, ooh, this must be a rare one. It was like getting a shiny Pokemon, because I'd be playing Pokemon on it. I don't think I ever caught a shiny. Did they even exist in first gen? I don't think they did. Cool. Age restricted. You must be 18 years old to use Tinder. Don't worry, you'll be joining us soon. In the meantime, enjoy your youth. -2 days left. They might just have, they were trying to look for an excuse to prevent you from lots of heartbreak. So they thought they could get away with the age one, but then unfortunately, they couldn't continue the lie. The math just didn't work out. They realized you were 18, but they were just they're just trying to stop you from having your heart broken by bots, okay? They just didn't want you to stroll across a bot who you really thought was great, and then all of a sudden you message, and then it replies with an advertisement or something, and you were like, my entire life is a lie now, and I'm very upset about this. I thought you were the one, but in fact, you're just a computer, and that makes me sad. Somehow my PC managed to get 1500 plus FPS in Far Cry. A few seconds later, the game crashed. You know what's really cool is that if it's a completely stationary image, your computer can usually get really, really high FPS. Like, in Minecraft, you're looking at a frozen block in the middle of void, like you're just standing on a single stone block, and the entire rest of the world is nothing. Like, you'll get very, very high FPS. And then if you crash, even higher FPS, because there's not much processing that has to go on at this point. So, anyway, or maybe you just upgraded to the 3000 series cards with NVIDIA. I don't know, maybe you got that Preview 3090 or something. You're really getting 1500 FPS. Speaking of which, I do need to upgrade my computer at some point. My processor is really the bottleneck right now, and I have to replace the motherboard because it's old architecture, and it's just like, sometime soon, man. I'm fit, but wow, you've gone 42,950 kilometers. That's impressive. That's like the entire circumference of the Earth. I wonder, it would be really cool if humans could have odometers. I don't know why I hadn't thought about that before. I suppose if you had worn a watch since the day you were born up until now, which is gonna probably become a thing that actually happens for people, given the way technology is going, there's going to be some device that's, put on the baby the day it's born, and then it's going to track the distance traveled. But I wonder, outside of actually being in cars and being on planes and stuff, how far have I actually personally walked? What is my human odometer? And the cool thing about a human odometer is that a higher mileage odometer would actually be seen as pretty cool. You've actually gone and done a lot of exercise. You've walked, you've explored, as opposed to a car where people are like, oh, that's way high mileage, I don't want to collect that one. Or, hey, it's really high mileage, so you can give it to me for cheaper because, it's old and probably needs more mechanical work. Human odometer being high is actually
Have you guys heard of Opera GX browser? Probably. Opera GX browser is one of the world's first browsers, but specifically meant for gamers. It's also got some really good Twitch integration features. You can log on to your Twitch on the left sidebar and even get notifications when your favorite Twitch streamers go live. I don't know about you guys, but I like to have a very specific...
Good for you. Anyway, I digress, but just a thought. The smooth criminal drop-down boxes. I mean, that's actually pretty cool. That's a little bit of like three-dimensional perspective. What did they build, the birth date selection screen in Unity or something? They added like, oh, you know what we can do? We can make these some 3D elements in here so that it just adds a little bit of spice. No one likes those just 2D vertical drop-down menus. We should have it so that we actually spawn a player in a three-dimensional world and they get to walk down a path that has the age selection as the things that they're walking on, and then you jump when you're on the tile, which corresponds to your birth month, day, and year. See, wouldn't that be cool and interactive and completely unnecessary? Absolutely. You fell asleep? Emergency alert. National Weather Service. Storm surge warning is in effect for the area. Urgently complete efforts to begin. Urgently complete. You see what happened here is the storm surge arrived as the warning was being typed out, and it just fried the keyboard and then sent the message. That's the only logical explanation here. Do you want to not toast it, or would you like to toast your life? Would you like your order toasted? No, don't toast. Or that, whatever that is. Your food's gonna look like that when it comes out. We basically put it into a human cremation machine, and then we leave it in there for about an hour. And by the time it comes out, then it looks like, yes, please toast. And I don't know what that is there, but it looks very toasted. It's got so many different colors in it that I didn't even know happened when you toast something. It's like it goes black, and then beyond that you start getting the rainbow once you go beyond black. So I was trying to install Ubuntu on my late 2006 iMac, and yeah, it looks like everything has gone great for you. This is probably what would happen if I tried to do something that involves Ubuntu, which I'm probably pronouncing incorrectly, because I see that and I'm like, I don't really know what it is, but the only time I've ever heard it is in relation to people who are programming things. And I feel like just the simple idea of using and installing it would probably be a little bit above my pay grade, let alone making use of it. So, looks like my assumptions might, in fact, be correct. So, no head? No head. What is this? What game? Is this Call of Duty? Oh no, PUBG, it says there in the upper left-hand corner. Well, on the plus side, see, if you don't have a head, then you don't have a way to get a headshot, which is a way that you take even more damage than if you take shots to the other parts. So, honestly, this could be a massive pay-to-win offering that they could do here in the game. They'd be like, well, if you just get rid of your character's head. If you don't want to get a headshot, you just don't have a head. And then $1,000, easy. Hill climb challenge level generator failed a bit. Challenge, drive 4,600 meters. I've never played this game before, but it looks pretty slick. Oh, looks like I'm not able to go through here. I mean, are we not playing Minecraft? Can I not just mine through the dirt? Does it not work? No? Okay. So that's lame. That machine should have some kind of drill mechanism on it. It looks made for that. Can you imagine? Like, look, that thing should have some kind of pointy, spinny thing on it. That would be perfect. And then you could have a whole other element to your game. You could bring the Minecraft element into climbing hills and just think of all the money there is to be had. I say when this game is probably grossing millions a day or something. What in tarnation? Oh, do we have another flight simulator glitch here? Always gotta love those. What a nice view. God, hey, you know what? This seems like it's actually good for your takeoff, though. That's gonna help you get taken off, dude. Perfect, bro. And you're in the air. Who needs a runway when you have a void that takes you to the other side of the earth? This is pretty freaking cool, with a bunch of tree obstacles on it to try to avoid. It reminds me of the dropper map that I played a year or two ago, where it was like you're falling, but it looked like it was horizontal. Oh, that doesn't look good at the end there. I think what happened is like you got so far deep into the earth that the pressure started getting a little bit too high. You started getting woozy. The plane was just getting crushed. There was so much air pressure down there that you were absolutely unable to handle it. You passed out and then you crashed outside the other side of the world, which is pretty cool. Dang, these next-gen laptops are lit, fam. PC features. NVIDIA GeForce GTX 0. Display 0. Intel Core i0. Storage 0. Memory 0. But you do, yeah, actually, there's a 5 there. You have 0.5 gigahertz. That's pretty impressive. That's pretty awesome. That's what I had in my first laptop I ever owned. It was a 500, or it was like 600 megahertz actually. I think it was a 600 megahertz processor, and it had 500 megabytes of RAM. Anyone who's older than me watching is like, that's nothing, bro. I had a 16K computer or something like that. But at the same time, like in comparison to what there is now, it's crazy. And my computer baseline requires like 8 gigs of RAM now just for basic functionality of on boot. That's where I'm at, which seems very high. Maybe that's bad, but I guess Chrome is a bit of a memory hog, and I have some background programs going on. But in any case, the way things are going, I wouldn't be surprised if there's an NVIDIA GTX 0 series card at some point. You got Xbox One, Battlefield 1. Everyone's going to the One brand. Where do you go from there? 0? Negatives? Windows is having an existential crisis. An unexpected error is keeping you from deleting a file. If you continue to receive this error, you can use this error code to search to help you with this problem. Error. The file exists. Therefore, it cannot be removed. This is a very important file. You could try deleting System32 instead. We'll let you do that. But this image, can't get rid of this. We like it. I think I turned on helicopter mode on my laptop by accident. CPU fan is at looking like beyond maximum integer value RPM. That's impressive. That thing, I'm surprised you're able to contain it. It should be blasting off into outer space. I guess at some point, once the air thins out enough, it's going to stop going. But you know what? At that RPM, it might actually just hit escape velocity and just fly out of the atmosphere. Actually, it might be too fast, and it's going to hit so much friction with the air that it's just going to incinerate itself. That's impressive. Well, kudos to the devs. Password blank strength is very high. Password this strength is very low. Hey, to be fair, I've never used a password of nothing for a website before. That'd be the last thing you'd be expecting as a hacker. You'd be like, what if I just hit enter with nothing in the password field? No, you would never expect it to be the case. You would expect it to error out, so you wouldn't even try it. That's truly next level 200 IQ thinking right there. Default help message. Amazon delivery driver needs help with your order. Yada yada. Unfortunately, your order couldn't be delivered. You can track your package order, or you track your order on your orders pages. Text session will close in 5 minutes. Are you still there? Default help message. Thank you. Thank you for this. Hey, at least, this was a year ago. So I hope you were able to get your order between then and now. If not, well, maybe they posted this because they've been going back and forth with Amazon for the last year, and finally it was like, this isn't working. I guess I'll show the public that I wasn't able to get my Amazon order from a year ago. I never heard back from Faisal. It's very sad. Nobody knows what happens to him. He kind of just disappeared into another dimension, never to be seen again. Just got this ad. Do RX. App Store, Google Play. Very, very beautiful photo that definitely doesn't look at all like either Thanos Chin or Jigsaw from Saw. It actually looks a lot like Saw character, which is slightly scary. I'm sure she has a really great smile. It just happened to get stretched a bit too far, and definitely makes me want to download the game. It's probably not a horror game, but it certainly looks that way. And the top, for the last month, iOS is making one of my Memojis do, I don't know if that's demonetized or not. It would appear that it has done that. I don't know how that has happened, but it has done and there you have. There you have, indeed, software gore. Anyway, that's it for the last month of software gore. I hope you have enjoyed. Make sure to like if you liked. Check out the playlist in the description if you want to catch more software gore, and sub to the channel.
Here's the fact, if you look at the problems that 99% of men are actually going through right now, this is literally what their computer's flooded with every.
If I asked you to picture a single cell, I bet you'd imagine something super tiny that you had to look at through a microscope, which is totally valid considering the vast majority of cells on this planet are microscopic, especially since we're talking about whole organisms that consist of just one cell. But there are some huge exceptions to this rule, and I really do mean huge. The 6 big single-celled creatures that we're going to talk about today are not your average cells. And because of that, they've challenged our ideas of how life works at the cellular level and beyond. When scientists first spotted the trumpet-shaped stentor caeruleus in pond water in the late 1700s, they mistook it for a hydra, the anemone relative, not the mythical monster. Hydras are made up of tens of thousands of cells, though, and stentors are but one. Each can grow to be up to 2 millimeters long, which, okay, is small, but it makes it a colossus in the unicellular world, and it's big enough to be unwieldy. You see, one of the reasons cells are small is that large cells are too hard to control. It simply takes too long to send information from one part to another. But stentors can achieve their large sizes because they have an elongated macronucleus, which puts the critter's genetic material everywhere it's needed. They also have lots of small micronuclei that help out when it's time to make more stentors, which they do the really old-fashioned way, by simply splitting into 2. But perhaps the most remarkable thing about them is their ability to regenerate. Most cells don't fare so well if their membranes are ruptured. But cut a stentor in half, and soon you'll have 2 totally fine stentors. In fact, thanks to the shape of its macronucleus, almost any piece of stentor can regenerate. It just needs a part of the macronucleus and a small piece of the original cell membrane. Researchers still have a lot of unanswered questions about this creature's unique healing abilities. Like, why don't the cell's insides leak out after it's cut open? How can multiple individuals regenerate from different fragments, and how does each fragment know which structures they need? But the more researchers study these weird little trumpets, the more they challenge our understanding of what cells can and can't do. Answering these questions will help us understand the full capabilities of all cells, microscopic or not. In the dark depths of the ocean, some 1,200 meters down, are weird little critters called gromia. And when they were first discovered in the early 2000s, researchers were completely puzzled. They'd simply never seen anything like them. It was later determined that these hard, grape-sized cells are a kind of testate amoeba, amoebas that make themselves porous protective shells called tests, which is super cool, but what's even cooler is that they move. Scientists believe gromias crawl ever so slowly by extending tiny feet-like projections called pseudopods through holes in their tests, and they leave behind noticeable tracks in the sediment. These just so happen to look very similar to fossilized tracks that date back as far as 1.8 billion years, tracks that were said to be evidence for multicellular life. You see, many paleontologists argue that there was simply no way for a single-celled organism to make gouges like that. Now, of course, we know that's not true. So the discovery of gromia challenged the evolutionary timeline. And now, most paleontologists think that multicelled creatures didn't come on the scene until about 600 million years ago, just before the Cambrian, when multicellular life as we know it really took off. Back in 2013, scientists exploring hydrothermal vents off the coast of Sicily found what they thought was a new species of sponge. The several centimeter-long creatures each had a stalk that penetrates into the sediment and holds it in place, and a globe-like top with lots of thin spikes sticking out of it, much like carnivorous sponges. And those spikes look a lot like spicules, the small hard structures made by sponges. It wasn't until later that researchers realized the organisms weren't animals at all. They actually belonged to a group of single-celled amoeba-like organisms called forams, and they decided to call them Spiculosyphon oceana. The researchers were right to be thrown by those spicule-like structures though, because they are in fact spicules. Each spiculosyphon collects and painstakingly arranges spicules from carnivorous sponges to steal their look. That's because it allows them to capture prey, like small invertebrates, in the same way carnivorous sponges do. So, yes, these are single-celled organisms that can devour both single and multi-celled organisms by dressing up like a multi-celled predator. Biology is weird. These unique creatures are only found living close to hydrothermal vent systems, and that may be because they prefer their water acidic and packed with the dissolved minerals that spew out of these underwater volcanoes. In fact, researchers think they could tell scientists where undiscovered vents are. Basically, if spiculosyphons are there, There must be recently active hydrothermal vents nearby. And they may also be a canary in the coal mine of sorts for ocean acidification. That's because while they like things acidic, they can't tolerate super acidic conditions. Their stolen shells would dissolve. So if they start struggling, that could indicate deeper waters are feeling the effects of climate change. Valonia ventricosa basically looks like what you would think a cell should look like, just supersized. They can grow to be 4 centimeters or larger. They're also known by the nickname sailor's eyeball, because back in the late 1800s, people thought that they were actually eyeballs staring back at them from underwater. But I think they look much more like giant underwater grapes. And in fact, they're kind of like grapes, at least structurally. The outer shell, or cell wall, contains a lot of cellulose, the same fibery substance found in all sorts of plants, including the skin of grapes. In fact, 19th and early 20th century scientists were able to work out the structure of cellulose by studying Valonia. They were able to look at it up close using X-rays and fancy microscopes to see that cellulose is made up of microfibrils, little parallel strands of cellulose bound together through hydrogen bonds. It's those bonds that make the cellulose rigid, which is how it gives Valonia the toughness it needs to grow so big. This deeper understanding of cellulose gained by studying Valonia likely played a role in the industrial development of cellulose-based products, which includes everything from plastics and lacquers to paper, cardboard, and more famously, film. Mermaids' wine glasses, or Acetabularia if you want to be scientific, can grow up to 10 centimeters tall, and they kind of look like fungi that you might find carpeting the forest floor with their stems and rounded caps. But they're actually single-celled algae that can carpet the seafloor in subtropical, shallow, rocky waters. Acetabularia has one giant nucleus located at the base of its stem, and because of that, it helped biologists understand what the nucleus actually does. During the 1930s and 1940s, German scientist Joachim Hammerling performed a series of experiments on Acetabularia to prove that the nucleus was the control center of a cell. He cut multiple specimens in half and found that only the ones containing the nucleus could regenerate. He also grafted together 2 species of Acetabularia and showed that the combined cell would take on the characteristics of whichever species its nucleus came from. Those experiments laid the groundwork for our modern understanding of the nucleus. It is a bit weird, though, that it's able to grow so large since all of its genetic material is down at the base. Like those Valonia we just talked about, they have lots of nuclei. In fact, once you get larger than a stentor, many single-celled plants have multiple nuclei which work together to manage the huge cell. Acetabularia gets around this by sending some of its genetic material to the upper parts of the cell as messenger RNA. It has all the machinery it needs up there to turn those into the proteins that that part of the cell needs. And in a surprising turn of events, it actually does have multiple nuclei, but only when it's about to reproduce. When a mermaid's wine glass wants to make more wine glasses, its big nucleus goes through several rounds of division to make little nuclei. Then all those little copies make their way up to the top of the cell. From there, they bud off into numerous spore-like reproductive cysts, which can float about for a ways before they settle down and grow to their full size. At first glance, you would probably have no idea that Caulerpa algae are individual cells. Individuals in some species can grow to carpet a square meter or more, and they sure don't look like your average cells. Each has a complex structure that consists of a stem, fronds that look like leaves, and root-like parts that anchor it in place. The reason a Caulerpa can grow so large is because it has loads of nuclei to keep all parts of it functioning properly. Caulerpa species also use a process called cytoplasmic streaming, which is essentially a plant's solution to a circulatory system. They always keep their cytoplasm moving in an organized fashion, which allows them to quickly transfer molecules and other structures around the cell. Lots of scientists have studied these algae over the decades. Researchers were particularly interested in learning more about how they get their intricate structures, because it was long assumed that that kind of complexity required multiple cells. Now, they believe it all boils down to when and where different genes are active. For instance, research published in 2015 showed that different genes are active in the nuclei in different parts of the cell, and these seem to be telling those regions what shapes to be. This has deepened our understanding of how all cells figure out their final shape and structure, and it's actually calling into question whether any plant is truly multicellular. You see, some researchers argue that all plants should be thought of as single-celled organisms because their cells are interconnected and communicate with each other through channels called plasmodesmata. And if cells are super connected, are they really separate cells? It's an intriguing question anyway. While humongous cells like Caulerpa are the exception, not the norm, because of their size, they've given researchers throughout history the incredible opportunity to dig into the typically microscopic world of cells. Because of that, they can help us understand the inner workings of all cells, big and small. In fact, you may have noticed that all these giant cells have something in common. They're all found in water. While it is possible for a large cell to exist on land, they're usually living in humid areas that have recently received heavy rains. Life in the water means less stress for cells of any size. No drying out, nutrients and waste products easily diffuse in and out, and the fluid pressure gives some extra support to their walls. So even in their placement on this planet, these cells have taught us a lot. Plus, they're just unbelievably cool. Thanks for watching this episode of SciShow, which is produced by Complexly. If you loved learning about these weird big cells, I think you'll love our Complexly sister channel, Journey to the Microcosmos. Journey to the Microcosmos is a relaxing journey to a world where stentors really are fearsome giants, with incredible microscopic footage by James Weiss, music by Andrew Huang, and the soothing voice of Hank Green. Plus, they've done whole episodes on stentors, so you might...
没人能对我的生活指手画脚。This is very upsetting.
Being trapped in scares me.
One of the big quests of modern science is the search for dark matter. It's a kind of particle that fills the universe, outweighing regular matter more than 5 to 1. Except, we don't really have any clue what it is or how it works. We know it's there because astronomers can directly see and measure things like its gravitational pull. And that's basically where our knowledge ends, and a big part of that is because we've never detected even a single dark matter particle up close. Now though, physicists have proposed a way we might do it. The proposal appeared last week in the journal Physical Review D, and if you want to give it a go, all you need are a few millimeter-sized pendulums or metal spheres. Well, actually more than a few. You're gonna need about 1 billion of them. What makes the search for dark matter so challenging is that dark matter doesn't work like the ordinary matter we're used to. Like ordinary matter, dark matter has a gravitational pull, but unlike the regular stuff, it doesn't interact with light or any other aspect of electromagnetism. And that's a huge pain because instruments like telescopes, microscopes, and mass spectrometers all rely on electromagnetism to work. So there's no good conventional way to try to study dark matter. Instead, scientists have traditionally relied on experiments with a proposed type of dark matter particle called a WIMP, or a weakly interacting massive particle. WIMPs are too light for us to detect their gravity, so in these tests, researchers wait for one to run smack into the nucleus of a regular atom. That would cause the atom to emit a bit of light that detectors can pick up. Except, even after decades, no experiment like this has ever conclusively picked up a WIMP signal. Physicists have long favored these particles as the source of dark matter because they're strongly supported by theoretical research. But that doesn't mean they definitely exist, or that they'd interact with regular atoms in this way. And if they don't, none of these experiments will be able to find them. But this new paper suggests another option. Their proposed test would search for a different category of potential dark matter particles, ones with a mass equal to around half a grain of salt. That's at least 1 billion times more massive than the WIMPs we've been looking for so far, and it's so heavy that each of these particles exerts a detectable amount of gravity, which is great because gravity is the only force where certain dark matter interacts with. To detect one of those particles, the authors propose 2 possible techniques. The first uses a 3-dimensional grid of tiny dangling force sensors. As a dark matter particle passes through the array, its gravity would tug a little on every sensor it passed, creating a trail of small disturbances. Their second idea is to levitate tiny spheres or beads using a magnetic field or laser. When the field or laser is turned off, Earth's gravity would cause the pieces to fall. And if a dark matter particle happened to be wandering by, the force of its gravity would disturb the sphere's trajectories ever so slightly, and they'd land in slightly different spots than expected. Making either approach work, though, will require something like 1 billion sensors packed into about a cubic meter. That's because ordinary protons and neutrons could easily whack into a single sensor and trigger it. In fact, this would probably happen a lot. But if you had 1 billion sensors, it would be more obvious when an enormous dark matter particle plowed through and triggered a bunch of them sequentially. Now, this proposal could seem like a long shot, but it's actually not that different from something we're already doing. Something that's been really successful lately, searching for gravitational waves. These are ripples in space-time created by massive accelerating objects, like black holes interacting with each other. And by the time they reach Earth, they're tiny, even smaller than protons. So to find them, we built huge, ultra-sensitive detectors, then just sat around and waited for a gravitational wave to swing by. And in a way, this dark matter detector is a lot like that. In fact, the 4 sensors these authors proposed using using are basically much smaller versions of the tools used by gravitational wave observatories like LIGO. So we have the knowledge on a large scale, and the rise of smartphones has also led to a major increase in our ability to manufacture millimeter-sized components. Virtually all of the 1.5 billion smartphones sold last year had an accelerometer on board to detect when you rotate the screen. And accelerometers are just tiny force sensors. They're probably not sensitive enough for detecting dark matter, but they show that the mass manufacturing is possible. So there's no doubt that all this would be a huge undertaking, and so far, nobody has signed up to actually build these designs. But we have the capabilities, and given that there's around 5 times more dark matter out there than ordinary matter, this proposal is a really exciting start. Thanks for watching this episode of SciShow Space News, and thanks especially to our patrons on Patreon. We really couldn't make these free educational videos without you, and we're lucky to have such a great community. If you want to learn more about Patreon and how to...
A portion of this video was sponsored by Salesforce. More about Salesforce at the end of the show. The first piece of evidence that showed our universe is expanding came in the light from distant galaxies. If you look at the spectrum of the sun, you see these dark lines, and we see those same lines in the spectra from galaxies, except they're shifted to longer wavelengths, towards the red end of the spectrum. So we say their light is redshifted. Now, the usual explanation for this redshift is that as the light is traveling through expanding space, the photons themselves become stretched, so short wavelengths get longer. And this is known as cosmological redshift. And the explanation is fairly intuitively satisfying, and most people go on without giving it a second thought. But the problem is, if you do give it a second thought, you think, well, if expanding space can stretch something like a photon, something that's so incredibly tiny, does it also stretch atoms and molecules? Is expanding space stretching stars and galaxies? And what about you? Are you expanding with the universe? To answer these questions, we've got to take a closer look at what it really means to redshift. Physicists actually talk about 3 different types of redshift. Doppler redshift, where observers moving relative to one another measure photons to have different wavelengths. Gravitational redshift, where observers at different locations in a gravitational field measure different wavelengths. And cosmological redshift, where observers exchanging photons over vast cosmological distances in an expanding universe measure different wavelengths. These 3 cases appear very different, and they're governed by different equations. So how does each redshift actually occur? Let's start with a photon in a gravitational field. There is this famous experiment conducted in 1959 by Pound and Rebka, sending photons up and down a 22-meter tower at Harvard. Now, they used gamma rays, but I'll represent them with visible light. They found that photons detected at the top of the tower were redshifted relative to the source by the exact amount predicted by general relativity, which is a tiny amount. I'm dramatically exaggerating the effect just so you can see it. Now, where along the photon's path does this redshift take place? Well, it seems to happen continuously. The photon loses a little bit of energy each millimeter it climbs up that tower, meaning that the photon in the middle of the tower would appear green. Now, according to Einstein's equivalence principle, being at rest on Earth's surface is indistinguishable from being in a rocket in deep space accelerating up at 1g. So, we could do the same experiment in a rocket ship and we should get the same result. If we send blue photons from the back of the rocket, they should be red when they reach the front. And in the middle of the ship, they would appear green. This is exactly what we saw at rest in a gravitational field, so the equivalence principle holds. Now imagine there are a line of external observers just hanging out in space at rest relative to each other, and they can all see into the rocket. Let's also say the rocket is initially at rest, and the thrusters are switched on the instant the photon is released. Now, since both observers are at rest at this moment, they will both measure the photon as having the exact same wavelength. It's blue. But what about when the photon reaches the middle of the rocket? Well, we know someone inside will see it as green. But what about a stationary observer outside? Well, to them, the photon has just been moving through ordinary flat spacetime. So it must look blue, just as blue as it was when it was emitted. So what's the deal? How can the same photon look green and blue at the same time? Has the equivalence principle been violated? The answer is no. It matters a lot to this measurement who is doing the observation. Consider this. After the photon is emitted, the rocket accelerates. It's speeding up. So by the time the photon reaches the middle of the rocket, everyone inside is now moving at high velocity relative to the source when the light was emitted, and relative to the observers outside the rocket. So it makes sense that the photon as measured inside will look different. It'll be redshifted. This is the Doppler redshift because the observer in the middle of the ship is moving very quickly away from the source. By the time the photon makes it to the top of the rocket, well, the rocket will be going even faster, and this is why it appears red. But to a stationary observer outside, well, it still looks blue. This thought experiment shows us that wavelength and energy are not intrinsic properties of photons. They are properties of the photon observer system. Now, let's recreate the Harvard Tower experiment. Observers in the building see the photon redshifted as it climbs. But here's a question for you. What would a free-falling observer see? Well, they would be just like the stationary observers in space watching the rocket accelerate up. The physics of these two situations are identical, so they would measure no redshift. To them, the photon would look blue the whole time. What I want to show is that there aren't actually three different types of redshifts. There is only one. We've seen that the gravitational redshift can equivalently be seen as a Doppler redshift when we do the same analysis in an accelerating rocket ship. So what about cosmological redshift? Well, for this, we have to zoom way out, past our solar system, the Milky Way galaxy, our local cluster of galaxies. We want to zoom so far out that the galaxies in the observable universe are like molecules in a fluid, the cosmic fluid. At this scale, we can treat the whole universe as being smooth and uniform. Cosmologists say it is homogeneous. And just as you don't notice the individual molecules in a cup of water, at this scale, we don't notice the individual galaxies in the cosmic fluid. And the cosmic fluid looks the same in every direction. There is no preferred orientation. It's said to be isotropic. Now, what you'll notice is that the cosmic fluid is spreading out. It doesn't matter where you look, you see the same thing. Things moving apart. The density of the cosmic fluid is decreasing over time, and this is the basic property of an expanding universe. We can draw some coordinates on the universe. We could pick any different coordinate system we like, but one way it's often done is to make a coordinate system that expands with the cosmic fluid. So there will be certain observers whose coordinates don't change over time, and these are known as co-moving observers. They are at rest with respect to the cosmic fluid. By the way, on Earth, we are not a co-moving observer. Our galaxy is moving at 600 kilometers per second relative to the cosmic microwave background radiation. Now, let's pick two co-moving observers a large distance apart and have them exchange a photon. Its wavelength will be stretched by the amount the universe has expanded during the photon's journey. This is the standard picture of cosmological redshift. But now consider a bunch of other co-moving observers along the path of this photon. Each one absorbs the photon and instantaneously emits another, identical to the one they measured. Now each successive observer will measure a slightly longer wavelength than the observer before them, the photon stretching out just as you'd expect in an expanding universe. But the reason they would give for this redshift would be different. To each observer, their neighboring co-moving observers would appear to be moving away from them in locally flat spacetime. So they would attribute the increase in wavelength to the Doppler shift, just due to the relative motion between them. The entirety of the cosmological redshift, then, can equivalently be thought of as the result of a long series of Doppler shifts. What we've seen is redshifting is not something that happens to a photon itself. Instead, it depends on what's happening to observers at the point of emission and absorption of that photon. And because of this, there are actually not 3 different types of redshift, there's only one, described by a single underlying mathematical framework. They only look different depending on your frame of reference. Now, it can be convenient to talk about expanding space when you have 2 co-moving observers exchanging a photon over vast distances in an expanding universe. Then the photon's wavelength is just stretched by the amount the universe expanded during its journey. That's nice and simple. But you can equally well describe the redshift by a long chain of Doppler shifts, no expanding space required. The misconception is to think that because photons are redshifted as they travel across the universe, that means expanding space is pulling on things and stretching things apart. That's not how it works. Space is not like that. So let's come back to the central question of this video, which is, do you expand with the universe? The answer is no, because on the scale of people, the universe is not homogeneous. I mean, matter is condensed down into objects and the Earth. And the universe is not isotropic. Looking up looks decidedly different from looking down. The basic assumptions we made about our expanding universe just don't apply here. I mean, the local space-time curvature is dominated by the Earth. So what if we took you out into deep space, the middle of nowhere? Then would you expand? Still no, because your body is held together by electromagnetic forces. But what if we could turn off the electromagnetic force so your body is just a jumble of particles that don't interact? Well, in that case, over time, you would expand. But only because our universe is now dominated by dark energy. So the take-home message of this video is that redshifting photons don't mean that space is expanding and pulling on everything, stretching things apart.
I'm mad at Disney, they tricked me, had me wishing on a shooting star. But now I'm 20-something, I still know nothing about who I am or what I'm not. So call me a pessimist, but I don't believe in it. Finding a true love's kiss is bullshit. 'Cause I felt sad love, I felt bad love. Sometimes happy love turns into giving up. I felt hurt love, by the word love. What the hell is love supposed to feel like? What the hell is love? What the hell is love? What the hell is love supposed to?
Today we're going to do a bit of an experiment. It seems we've been doing quite a few of these lately on my channel. We're going to see just how easy or difficult it is to differentiate a current pro from retired pros. Now, I won't spoil anything, but this doesn't exactly go as planned. Let's just say our pro decided to try and hide a little better than we expected him to. But here's the basic idea. 5 retired pros join 1 pro in a 3v3 lobby with all our names, avatars, banners, every single thing about us being the exact same in the game. The only aspect of ourselves that is different is our topper. Each game we'll all pick a unique topper, which we send to the pro to ensure that no one picks the exact same topper. And then we play a simple match of Rocket League. After the game is over, we vote on which player we think is the pro. Sounds simple enough, right? Will the pro remain undetected, or will the gameplay be too obvious? Let's find out. Enjoy. And before we jump into these games, we should get to know all the players a little bit more, starting with the retired pros. Corrupted G is one of my oldest teammates in Rocket League. After competing with me in Season 3 of RLCS, he later moved on to Evil Geniuses for a couple seasons, and soon after transferred to Chaos Esports. After retiring, given that he was a consistent player in the RLCS for a long time, Rogue picked him up as a coach to help their team push to the next level. Sathy really broke into the scene in RLCS Season 7 when he made it into the RLCS with a team named Bread, who later got picked up by Space Station. Down the road, he moved on to Susquehanna Sonics, and this past week he officially retired after leaving the team to focus on his university studies. Fireburner is one of the oldest pros in Rocket League, making a name for himself back in the first season of RLCS under a team named Kings of Urban. That team was later picked up by Energy, and Fire stayed on that roster until July 2019 to retire and coach Cloud9, and now version 1 to present day. Sis competed in RLCS Season 1 and has always been known to be quite the Rocket League personality in both competitive Rocket League and Rocket League content. He became a mainstay in the RLCS until Season 6, where he decided to retire from competitive. He became Energy's new coach in Season 8 of RLCS, where he remains today. And then there's me. For those of you guys who have followed me for a long time, you'll know that I competed in 5 seasons of the RLCS starting in Season 2. I've been to over 25 LAN events and 2 World Championships, being known mostly for my position in Ghost in the earlier days of RLCS. I decided after reaching 100,000 subscribers on YouTube a year and a half ago that I should focus solely on content, and I'm sure glad I did. Being retired from professional play has allowed me to create more creative videos and content for you guys. Now the pro with us today is Rapid from the KC Pioneers. You may have recently seen him break 2 Rocket League world records with me on my channel, but if you didn't, you should definitely check that video out. Rapid has shown time and time again that his team means business lately, and has shown how consistent he is in his rotation as well as mechanics. Definitely check out his team in the next RLCS events if you have the chance. Now, all of these players are amazing people, and if you want to check out them individually and what they're up to, I'll have links to all of their socials for you to check them out. Be sure to check in the description. Now let's get into the matches. Enjoy. Got the black visor, LFT, Rooster, Cobb Hat's chilling in the back there. And the Portal Cake and the white glass. Okay, they're pretty small, but we'll hopefully be able to see it. All right. Okay.
Wait, are we not meeting?
I'm not gonna mute. I'm chilling. I'm chilling.
I'm not meeting.
Yeah, I'm just chilling.
Oh, Ivan.
I got it.
Okay. All right.
I'm going.
Dude, this is so confusing. This is so confusing already. I thought we were trying to help each other.
I'm so confused. I know.
Oh no.
You guys have asked, you guys
Oh
are,
no.
I'm so confused.
And one of the questions I'd like to ask them is, why does evolution work at all? For life to evolve, there has to be a huge amount of order. There's the order in the cell, then there's the order in the molecules, and the order in the elements, and the order in the subatomic forces and particles. Each level, that order becomes more symmetrical as you go down. If you don't have that order, evolution doesn't get off the ground.
Jehovah's Witnesses released a new episode of JW Broadcasting, and they decided to talk about something I forgot about. They aren't allowed to practice martial arts. It's one of the strangest rules they have, as far as I'm concerned. Anyways, they made a video about it, so let's watch it and see what they had to say. Let's get into it.
I sweated blood to train myself in martial arts. So when I joined a big competition, I won the fight. My life changed. I became a bodyguard of a well-known politician and taught martial arts to some popular celebrities. My students, my boss, and his family, they all became part of my life. One day, some Jehovah's Witnesses came by and gave me a tract. I was surprised and really happy to learn God's name. I thought, this could be what I've been looking for.
I know I probably don't have to say this for the 1000th time, but Jehovah isn't God's name. It never was. Jehovah's Witnesses are one of very few groups that believe that. Some Pentecostal groups believe it too. In the Bible, the Tetragrammaton is a word for the 4 letters that represent God's name. This is what they look like. In English, those letters translate to YHWH. Hebrew's written from right to left. J's didn't even exist until the 1500s. So how is YHWH pronounced? There's some debate about where the accent marks should go and all that, but it's generally agreed that it's pronounced Yahweh in modern English. Ancient Hebrew didn't use vowels. Readers were supposed to fill in the vowels based on context and previous understanding of the written language. Centuries later, Hebrew writers eventually created a vowel system that could be added in without changing any of the original text. So you'd have a word like YHWH, and instead of completely rewriting everything with vowels, they could just go back and add these little markers around it to stick vowels in. but the people doing the work had some weird superstitions about the name of God. They believed it should never be spoken out loud. So instead of putting the proper vowels in the Tetragrammaton, they added vowels for the word Adonai, which basically means my lords. They did it that way to make the name really difficult to pronounce. So when people came to it when they were reading, they wouldn't accidentally speak the word. After adding the vowels for the word Adonai into the Tetragrammaton, which is YHWH, you get YAHOWAH, or Yahweh. Over time, as the religion moved across Europe, it eventually made its way to the Germany region, where Y's are commonly pronounced with a J sound and W's are pronounced with V sounds. So is Jehovah God's actual name? Is it an English translation? No. It's a mashup made to trick people out of using the real name, which is Yahweh. The first appearance of the name Jehovah was the King James Bible, originally written in 1611. So sorry, bud, you never learned God's name. Some people just told you it was this when it really wasn't. It never was, and it never will be. Let's continue.
So I accepted a Bible study, and I realized that I owed everything to God.
That's weird. You talk to a couple for 1 single hour, and by the end of it, you're convinced that you owe them your life, and you pledge to dedicate your life to the person they've just introduced you to? Am I the only one that thinks this looks like a pyramid scheme?
When I attended my first meeting, I saw how humble and caring the witnesses were, but my neighbors made fun of me.
Within 200 years after it began, Christianity abandoned many of the teachings of its founder, Yeshua, commonly called Jesus. Influenced by Greek and Roman paganism, Zoroastrianism,
I wanted to beat them because I knew I could. I was ashamed that I couldn't do anything to defend Jehovah's name. Then one morning, before going to the meeting, for the first time, I approached Jehovah in prayer, asking him to give me courage. I couldn't do it alone. After that prayer, I felt that Jehovah really strengthened me. And I humbly told the neighbors that I was going to the Kingdom Hall.
There's a juxtaposition here. Jehovah's Witnesses are trying to show you how evil and cruel the world is, and how kind, humble, and good Jehovah's Witnesses are. Cults do something called love bombing. They're overly nice and interested in you. It makes you feel welcomed and wanted. It's especially nefarious for people who are in an emotionally vulnerable position. Jehovah's Witnesses tend to target people who've just felt tragedy anyways, because it makes the brainwashing process a lot easier. They also have a vested interest in making the us versus them mentality even worse in new recruits. Whatever it takes to make people think they're the good guys and everybody else is the bad guy. So it comes as no surprise to me that they talk about how nice Jehovah's Witnesses are and how mean everybody else is. Let's continue.
Since then, I've always prayed to Jehovah when making decisions. I needed to leave martial arts. I had to quit my job as a bodyguard and stop carrying guns. Doing his will wasn't always easy, but Jehovah gave me the courage to do so.
Doing whose will? You mean your study buddy? Because I'm not convinced martial arts are evil, according to the Bible. So what's their justification for that claim? They have a whole section on their website dedicated to it. They say it's linked with false religion and it's linked to the occult. And if that doesn't grab you, they reference Isaiah 2:4. Quote, "He shall judge between the nations and shall arbitrate for many peoples. They shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore." I wouldn't consider self-defense learning war. That's a little bit of a stretch, but that's what Jehovah's Witnesses do, isn't it? They stretch and twist the Bible around until it says what they want it to say. They have a long history of doing it this way. Who cares if you ruin somebody's life? Who cares if this is the only way they know how to support themselves? That's their problem. This dude just threw his trophies in the trash. What's he gonna do for work?
My boss asked me to visit him. He offered me a new car and double my salary. I went to the washroom and intensely prayed again to Jehovah for courage. Jehovah, help me, please, I said. I can't do this on my own. In the end, I chose Jehovah. Jehovah is more precious to me than anything this world could offer. I told him, sorry, but I'm not accepting your offer. It felt like losing a family in death. eventually, I got baptized. I am now serving as a regular pioneer.
Serving as a regular pioneer? And how much money does that make you? Oh, none? Right. Pioneers are basically people who agree to a certain number of hours knocking on doors every month for a year. I don't know what the numbers are now, but I think when I was in it, the expectation was like 70 hours per month for 12 consecutive months. And no, it doesn't generate any money for you. You're basically just a door-to-door salesman who works for free. So how's this guy surviving? My guess is he's probably doing what most Jehovah's Witnesses do. He's probably a window cleaner, which is a perfectly respectable occupation. But when you have so much love and potential in another field, and you throw it in the trash, it breaks my heart. There was a Jehovah's Witness in my congregation when I was a kid, who was at one time a well-respected artist. He sold his last painting for a lot of money. I was told it was 6 figures. And then he met Jehovah's Witnesses. From there, he vowed to never have art as a hobby again. Why? Because it could take precedence over Jehovah. So what's he do now? He cleans offices at night and pioneers during the day. As a Jehovah's Witness, you have to be cautious about having hobbies because you might start to like your hobby more than you like Jehovah. And they can't have that. So the artist I knew quit his job, quit painting or drawing or anything, and started doing something he hates, so it's 100% guaranteed that he won't like working more than he likes Jehovah. This is fucking sad. Jehovah's Witnesses aren't just worked to the bone by the organization. If they give up on giving away free labor to the governing body, they lose everything they ever knew and loved. Everybody who is important in their lives will abandon them permanently. They're pushed into living a life they hate so they don't risk liking it more than they like Jehovah. It doesn't get more sad than that. So that's the end of the clip. Let's see what the governing body member had to say about it.
How was Narciso tempted? When his neighbors made fun of him for going to the Kingdom Hall, he thought about using these and going back to using martial arts. Yes, ridicule tested Narciso's humility, but through prayer, he was able to speak calmly and confidently with his neighbors. Narciso's boss tempted him with a new car and a raise. What did Narciso do? He immediately went to a quiet place and prayed intensely. When we face similar temptations, we can be confident that through prayer, Jehovah will help us to do the right thing.
It burns me up inside that there are millions of people out there trudging through life, barely making it, never getting too involved in something they love to do because they don't want it to become more important to them than Jehovah. The whole bit is that the governing body wants to be that obsession in everybody's life. They want you to be obsessed with knocking on doors. To this day, talking to people I've never met is hard. I'm just not built for it. Going up to somebody's door and cramming my beliefs down their throats stresses me out more than you could imagine. Some people just aren't fit for this kind of thing. But if they don't do it, they lose everything, barely making their way through life, barely scraping by. Not just living a miserable existence, not just doing something completely insufferable, but barely making enough money to live. Because getting a college education is demonized from the top down. Hopefully we can live to see the day when this organization is exposed as the monster that it is. Anyways, that's all I've got for you. If you like what I do and you want to see me continue to do it, you can support me in a few ways. First, there's Patreon. That's probably the best way. But if you want to get something back for your support, you can check me out on Teespring, or you can check me out on Etsy. I have a store where I sell all kinds of interesting stuff. Mostly it's 3D print.
I'm here with legend David Hasselhoff. Tell us.
I've been following televangelists and evangelical nutbags more generally for a while. I've talked about Pat Robertson a few times before, but he stands out from the rest in one very distinct way. He recently came out and said he doubts Christians are stupid enough to be creationists. Pat Robertson, saying Christians are stupid for being creationists. Knock me over with a feather. Well, guess who that pissed off? Our old buddy Ken Ham. So let's take a look at the exact quote and see what he means. Let's get into it.
This is Carol who says, why does your show promote the old earth theory and not the other biblical viewpoint, which is believed by most Christians?
Well, I don't think most Christians have got, stupid enough to believe that other.
Wow. Okay, there's a lot to unpack here, and we're only 13 seconds in. First of all, I don't think the majority of Christians are young Earth creationists, surprisingly. But, as my hero from American Dad, Steve, says, no need to wonder, just loaded up our question gun, let's go answer hunting. Let's see. According to Pew Research, 33% of not just Christians, but all Americans believe that we evolved over time through natural selection. 48% believe the process was guided or allowed by God, and 18% said we've always existed in our present form. Although I have to point out, for the record, they presented the survey in different ways to different people, and they tended to get slightly different results. A 2015 study by Pew Research Center shows that 35% of American adults don't believe that humans and other living things have evolved. So I will grant you this, there are a lot of people who believe this shit in the US. Too many. Our science education has unquestioningly failed us, but is it the majority? Not the majority of the US population. Is it the majority of Christians? In the US, it might be. I would venture to guess it's not a worldwide problem. The US is a special kind of beast. The US has a serious science denial problem that isn't anywhere near as bad in other parts of the world.
The other is the Usher theory. You added all the generations from Adam until the current time, and you say, all right, that adds up to 7,000. Okay. And so therefore the Earth is only 7,000 years old. Well, that's just nonsense. I mean, there are just too many geological factors, too many things that have happened on our Earth. The Earth is about 14 billion years old, and there's just no question about it. You've got the dinosaurs, you've got all the things that have happened on this Earth, and there's too much geology. I mean, it's just established science. So the idea of having a 6,000 or 7,000 year Earth is just any Christians who believe that, I'm telling you that they aren't very up on today's.
That's true. There's a lot of contradicting evidence, an absurd amount. But if you start breaking this down, there are a few categories of belief with creationism. There's a group of people who do exactly as Pat said, follow the lineages outlined in the Bible and add up the generations to come to about 7,000 years. Everything in the Bible is perfectly true, accurate, and free of errors. Bizarre, considering the fact that I can flip to any two random pages and they'll contradict each other. But that aside, this group of people call themselves young Earth creationists. They believe the Adam and Eve story is literally true. They believe the Noah's Ark story is literally true. They'll spend their lives and dedicate their time and money to making sense of the story. They'll spend years finding ways to bypass and explain the errors away. Ken Ham is a good example. We'll get into him in a minute. Another example would be a sect of Pentecostalism. Any evangelical Protestant extremist. Most Baptists, many Methodists. But Catholicism holds a slightly different perspective. Catholics, for example, are what you'd call old Earth creationists. They generally believe the book of Genesis was a storybook, never intended to be taken literally. Not even by the authors. In Genesis chapter 1, it details the days of creation. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. On day 1, he created light. Day 2, the sky was created. Day 3, dry land, seas, plants, and trees. Day 4, the sun, moon, and stars. Day 5, creatures that live in the sea and creatures that fly were created. Day 6, animals that live on the land, and finally, humans. Old Earth creationists believed that they weren't literal days. The whole thing was to be taken as a metaphor, which would make sense because you can't have plants created on day 3 without the sun created on day 4, and light was created on day 1. The whole thing is nonsense. Young Earth creationists insist this is literal, and battle old Earth creationists by saying that it only makes sense if the days are literal, since plants can't survive without the sun. But honestly, none of it makes sense. As I said, the official stance of the Catholic Church is old Earth creationism. God still made it all happen, but not in 6 days, 7,000 years ago. The people are allowed to accept evolution as the fact that it is, if they so choose, and it won't interfere with their standing in the church. Jehovah's Witnesses, surprisingly, are kind of old Earth creationists too. You really have to insulate yourself in a bubble to stick to a young Earth creationist belief system. Then there are people like me, people who believe the whole thing is made up. Anyways, I guess Pat Robertson falls into the old Earth creationist category, but most of his viewers are probably some form of evangelical, so it makes sense that this is a point of contention with his audience. Let's continue.
I believe science. I mean, let's face it, God didn't, look at Hugh Ross. He said, he's written things. He said, this whole planet was set up for God's purpose, and the universe is tuned for life. But it didn't get here in 6,000 or 7,000 years. It got here over almost 14 billion years to get this Earth to work.
Well, who do we have here?
Grew up in Haywood. The whole street was my family. Neighbors helped each other out. Thought nothing of it.
I'm pleased to see you have not forgotten your roots.
Born here, live here, die here. Childhood memories. Robbing buildings, running away from badges. Iron tasted blood from a split lip.
Motherfucker.
Got everybody fighting for a slice of the street.
Get the fuck out of Vista.
If you keep getting jumped, you find some stronger chewers.
Do you want to spend the rest of your days blasting scabs? Or become a legend overnight?
We have arrived. The Major.
Ready to get your cherry popped? Yeah, come on.
My childhood? Let's see. Racing my bobber for the first time through the hills. Oh, and first kiss in the middle of a synth cornfield.
We nomads choose who to make our family. And choice forges strong bonds and a higher duty that stands solid as an old oak.
My family's in pieces. That's why I'm headed for Night City.
Makes you an outcast among outcasts.
Miss this, you know? Camaraderie.
I know. I saw it in your heart the first time we met.
You know what I always liked about nomads? Your taste, no, hunger for freedom. Not easy to come by in Night City. Corp's got their grubby claws and everything.
I have those reports you asked for.
They were supposed to be ready yesterday.
The world's going to tear us apart when the word gets around.
The world's never going to find out.
If I go down, you're going down with me. No, I'm not fucking joking.
This isn't a request, V. But no way you're fucked, right? You're the one who fixes other people's shit.
If you work in Arasaka counter intel, you're always fucked.
Today, they got you to zero somebody. Tomorrow, they'll get somebody else to zero you.
What's the rules, Jack? Want to be top? Gotta have some skin in the game.
Yeah, but you're not on top. Saburo Arasaka is. And you're the pendejo who keeps him there. Work for yourself, live for yourself. That's the only way.
No one picks up a ball wanting to change the world. They want to escape it.
Unemployment, crisis, everything is not how it should be.
They want to become part of something. That something could take them anywhere. They can make a friend, make the team, or make the league.
Where it is right now.
I know this is probably pedantic, but I want to clarify one point. I respect the fact that Pat Robertson is simping for science at the moment, but this is an exception to the rule, an outlier. This dude is actually a monster. He has hate in his heart for lots of groups, including but not limited to the LGBT community, and I simply cannot respect somebody like that. At any rate, I want to correct a point he made just now about the age of the Earth. The universe is almost 14 billion years old. That's not the age of the Earth. About 5 billion years ago, the sun ignited. When that happens, it sprays material all over the place and forms what's called an accretion disk. As time goes on, the accretion disk gathers into mounds of material. With enough time, asteroids pound into each other to form bigger and bigger structures. When one of those structures is so big that the gravity forms it into a ball shape, it's officially classified as a planet. That happened to Earth roughly 4.54 billion years ago. So thanks for respecting the science, Pat. But the science actually says the Earth formed 4.54 billion years ago, not 14 billion. Anyways, naturally, Pat's rational position gets a lot of hate from other Christians. He drew the ire of Ken Ham, the guy who started the Creation Museum. He was so pissed off at Pat for holding this position that he said he should retire. Let's take a look at the clip that tipped Ken Ham over the edge.
I could say that the short earth thing is wrong, but what I'll say is, how do you count a day? What is a day? A day is how long it takes our planet to rotate one time, and that's evening and morning because it's the way it faces the sun. So it turns. Now that's 24 hours, that's a day. Now, what is a sun day? The sun has to turn. How long does it take the sun to turn? It must take a lot longer because it's a great big planet. All right, now let's assume it's the universe. How long does it take for the universe to turn all the way around? 1 billion years? 10 billion years? How long does it take?
I'm sorry, what? What is this dude talking about? None of this makes sense. I'm sorry. This is where the creationist thinking takes you. Out of the realm of science and into the realm of fantasy. First of all, the sun is not a planet. A planet doesn't necessarily have to have magnetic poles to be a planet. That only happens if it has an iron core like Earth does usually. The sun is massively magnetically charged, but it doesn't have a north pole and a south pole like Earth does. Since the sun is kind of fluid, the poles get all twisted up until they finally snap like a rubber band and shoot stellar material into space, called a solar flare. Sometimes the material flies toward Earth. When it does, our magnetic poles repel it and light up, called aurora borealis, aka the northern lights. When that happens, it's been known to knock out power grids. It could be a real problem. If there's a big enough solar flare and it's headed straight for Earth, our biggest concern would be losing power. We don't really have to worry about it running into us directly or anything. And to Pat's other note, that the bigger a quote-unquote planet is, the slower it turns, that's just inaccurate. It doesn't matter how big a planet is. Jupiter is 318 times more massive than Earth. Earth's radius is 3,958 miles. Jupiter's radius is 43,440 miles. So the radius is 10 times bigger, and its day is 10 hours long versus our 24-hour day. It's not really about how big it is, it's about how much energy it has. And for the record, the sun does rotate too. As I said, it isn't the same across the entire surface since it's kind of fluid, but at its equator, it rotates every 27 days. Now let's get back to what Pat was saying that got him canceled by Ken Ham.
A day with the Lord is 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is a day. So it's, you can be honest with Scripture and still, if you understand that a heavenly day, a universal day, is a long time. But the truth is, without question, you cannot account for all of the geological phenomenon, all the things that have been discovered. There is no way under heaven that this earth that we live in could have taken place in 6,000 years. It couldn't have possibly done it. But that's how you reconcile with Scripture, all right?
Now, obviously, I agree with him. It's absurd to think God created the Earth in 6 literal days 7,000 years ago. If he did, he made it so it looked absolutely indistinguishable from 4.54 billion years ago. And that begs the question, why? Why would he do that? He's actively setting out to make people think he didn't exist and he didn't create the Earth. I thought he created the Earth for his glory or some other shit. Didn't he want to show it off? Didn't he want to prove how powerful he was or something? Isn't that why he supposedly created all this stuff? Well, Ken Ham is all bent out of shape over it. He expressed his grievances in tweet form. So let's see what he said. He said, quote, Pat Robertson said there's no way under heaven that this Earth that we live in could have taken place in 6,000 years. It couldn't have possibly done it. But Pat, the fact is there's no way under heaven that what you say is correct, because you're telling God he got it wrong in his word. And the only Bible passage you mentioned, you took out of context. 2 Peter 3:8, with the Lord one day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is one day, is in the context of the second coming, explaining God is outside of time. This has zero to do with the days of creation. And Pat, you didn't use Genesis and what God actually states and discuss the meaning of the Hebrew word for day in the context in Genesis 1. Instead, Instead, you accepted the pagan religion of millions of years and add that to God's word, thus undermining the authority of the word of God. You are putting a stumbling block before people in regard to them taking God's word seriously. You need to retire, Pat, and let people who actually do believe God's word in Genesis and understand it answer these questions. And most of what you said doesn't make sense anyways in regard to the question asked. Oh, and the sun is not a planet, it's a star. Woe to the shepherds who destroy and scatter the sheep of my pasture, declares the Lord. Jeremiah 23:1. I love it. We have a true blue Christian battle on our hands. I love how these people say anybody who wears a mask is a sheep and unironically use the word sheeple, a thoroughly underused word in my opinion, and then turn around and compare themselves to sheep in a biblical context. It's honestly hilarious, in some ways, and sad in others. Ken Ham canceled Pat Robertson because he says he acts as a stumbling block to true Christians. If very basic science is a stumbling block to Christianity, then they have bigger problems at Pat Robertson. Honestly, I couldn't possibly care less if somebody wants to be a Christian, but these people are extremists in the truest sense. That's what I have a problem with. The country is in a bad place right now. Basically anybody will acknowledge that. But these extreme evangelical young earth creationists have made it their goal to deny science and make things worse. Some do it out of accelerationist philosophy. They want things to get worse. They want to make the world a more dangerous place because there's a silver lining behind every mushroom cloud. As my mom used to tell me, Armageddon will be here any 5 minutes now. These people are waiting with bated breath, and they're doing everything they can to precipitate it. Anyways, that's all I've got for you. If you like what I do and you want to see me continue to do it, you can support me in a few ways. First, there's Patreon. That's probably the best way. But if you want to get something back for your support, you can check me out on Teespring, or you can check me out on Etsy. I have a store where I sell all kinds of interesting stuff. Mostly it's 3D printed game stands. But I also sell these 2020 dumpster fire candle holders, or just regular
There's a pattern to genius. There's a method behind the magic. I always tell people my inspiration was my desperation, and I don't do this to impress you.
Thank God we have a president like Donald J. Trump who understands that.
I don't think I've ever talked about Robert Jeffress on my main channel, but I've covered him on my podcast a few times. He's a perfect representative for the evangelical voting bloc, and he had some very strange shit to say about atheists. So let's take a look at this clip and see what he said. Let's get into it.
There are those that would say that the separation clause of the Constitution would mandate that all public discourse be totally secular. Do you believe that the separation clause mandates secular discourse?
I just want to point out that this is framed in a disingenuous way. What's he mean by public discourse? Does that mean literally anything said by anybody in public? Nobody wants to eliminate religious discussion from the public. In fact, I've turned a career into religious discussion. I'd be out of a job if the government didn't allow religion as a subject of public discourse. I think the argument is people don't want public entities, i.e. the government or government institutions, to endorse one religion over another. How would this guy feel if the government started forcing kids to read the Satanic Bible every day at school? How would he feel if teachers led the students in prayers to Satan? He wouldn't like it very much. So to avoid that little kerfuffle, the government just isn't supposed to take a side on religious matters. It subsidizes religious movements by not making them pay taxes, but it does it fairly. Any religious institution gets tax-exempt status. Muslims, Satanists, Christians, everybody. But these guys are what I like to call Christian supremacists. They believe this should be a Christian state. They should cram Christianity down everybody's throats. They don't really care what the Constitution says, ultimately. If it explicitly forbid the government from endorsing Christianity by name, they'd be pushing to have the amendment removed, just like they're pushing to have the Johnson Amendment removed, a provision in U.S. tax code that prohibits all non-profit organizations, including churches, from endorsing political candidates. Let's continue.
Well, first of all, there is no separation clause. It doesn't appear anywhere in the Constitution. There's no such thing as a separation of church and state in the Constitution. What the First Amendment says is Congress shall make no law regarding the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Our forefathers came from another country where there was a state-imposed church, where people were forced to worship. They wanted no part of that. They said, we're not going to allow government to establish a state church and coerce people to worship in it. That's all it says. It has nothing to say about Ten Commandment displays in schools, nativity scenes in the public squares, or prayers at the graduation. That is absolutely...
Okay. I think I see the disconnect here. Let me frame it another way for you. Imagine courthouses across the country started putting up statues of Sharia law. How would that make you feel? It would make you feel a little like the government was endorsing Islam, right? What if schools started doing Muslim prayers every day? That's a government entity, as are courthouses. How would you feel about that? In fact, this little meme's been floating around social media for years. American middle schools caught forcing students to do Muslim prayers 5 times a day. Time to revoke funding, retweet. Turns out this is a picture of students doing a tornado drill. One easy way to tell it's not a Muslim prayer is the fact that the kids are facing opposite directions. Their heads are up by the walls. When Muslims pray, they're supposed to face Mecca. Mecca is considered Islam's holiest city. It's the birthplace of Muhammad. Tons of Muslims make pilgrimages to it every year. So when they pray, they face Mecca. If they're in the US, that means they face northeast. These kids are facing the walls, not northeast. But these people completely disintegrate at the idea that this might be happening. It's completely insane. They don't want equality, they want supremacy, plain and simple. Let's continue.
In 1980, the Supreme Court in Stone versus Graham said, you can no longer display the Ten Commandments in a Kentucky school. Can't even display them, much less teach them. What's interesting, Clark, is 118 years before that, a similar case came before the Supreme Court of whether the Bible could be read in school. And the Supreme Court said unanimously, and I'm quoting, why may not the Bible, especially the New Testament, be taught as God's revelation? Where can the principles of morality be so clearly found than the New Testament?
Since the pandemic, we've relied even more on social media.
And more than half of us turn to our devices for news.
That means we've all become publishers,
amplifiers,
spreaders of information.
And with that comes a responsibility, because words matter.
That's why it's up to you to read between the lines.
Seek the truth.
Well, first of all, I want to point out that this guy just lies all the time. Sometimes there isn't even a grain of truth to it. It's just completely fabricated. If he thinks it'll help illustrate a point or further a goal, then he'll just make shit up. Now, I don't know if that's what he did here. I'm just saying I'm not going to take his word for anything. Who knows? Maybe he is actually telling the truth here. And if he is, maybe he didn't even twist it completely out of context. I don't know. Ultimately, it doesn't really matter. Here's the bottom line. You wouldn't settle for the Quran being taught in public schools. I'm not going to settle for the New Testament being taught in schools. If you want to teach it in a class about religious history alongside the Quran and the Bhagavad Gita and the Satanic Bible, then please be my guest. Teach about the history. But trying to teach morality from a book as horrific and disgusting as the Bible is like... well, I guess I can't think of an analogy worse than that one. It's like trying to teach morality using the Bible. The weirdest part about this whole thing is the fact that they know some of the moral principles the Bible has to offer are wrong. The Republican Party has to win the evangelical voting bloc to win seats in government. That's just what it is. They always pander to the evangelical voting bloc. But there are some policy positions supported by the Bible that the Republican Party knows wouldn't land with the voters. Like, for example, slavery. The Bible is pro-slavery. That's just what it is. Republican politicians know better than to come out in support of it. They know they couldn't win on that ticket. By the same token, they know there are some policy positions that the Republican Party supports that the Bible doesn't support. I honestly have no clue how Jesus came to be a symbol of capitalism when he said, sell all your shit and give it to the poor and follow me. Or the fact that he flipped the money changers' tables at the temple. He said to love your neighbor as yourself. He represented peace and love more than most characters in the Bible. Yet the evangelical voting bloc, which is the key voting bloc for the Republican Party, inspires the deepest tribalism and hatred for the other that I have ever seen. Anyways, let's continue watching.
Where can the principles of morality be so clearly found than the New Testament? Now that was the Supreme Court 118 years earlier. And every time I'm on Fox debating some of these pinheads from the ACLU,
this demonizing of the ACLU blows my mind. One time the ACLU defended the KKK's right to hold a peaceful march through a town. They've never been interested in quote-unquote taking sides. The ACLU has only ever cared about maintaining people's human rights. That's it. It just so happens that Christian nationalists like this dude want to take people's rights away, so they made themselves the enemy of the ACLU. Philosophically, as far as I'm concerned, no organization is above criticism. None. Even the ACLU. But if you find yourself in direct opposition to the ACLU, which historically has only ever stood for human rights, then you should probably do some introspection.
I say, now tell me, why is it in the mid-1800s you could read and teach the New Testament, but suddenly the Supreme Court decides 118 years later that you can't even post the Ten Commandments? What changed? Did the Constitution change and nobody told us about it? Of course not. The Constitution hasn't changed, but what has changed is this. We have allowed the atheists, the secularists, the humanists to hijack our Constitution and pervert it into something our forefathers never intended. That's what the problem is.
I've always wanted to work in sound, but I wasn't sure how to make it happen. I could have gone to a 4-year school, but at Crest, I was able to skip the electives and master the essentials in under a year. The hands-on training I received
Wow, dude really hates humanists, apparently. Humanism, according to the dictionary, refers to a perspective that affirms some notion of human freedom and progress. It views humans as solely responsible for the promotion and development of individuals and emphasizes a concern for humans in relation to the world. It looks for solutions to problems centered on human agency as opposed to divine intervention, and looks to science rather than revelation from a supernatural source to understand the world. So I guess the opposite of that would be reliance on prayer to solve problems? Well, I can tell you from a first-hand experience that prayer doesn't do the trick. As George Carlin said, doesn't God have a divine plan? What happens if something you want goes against the plan? What's the point of the plan if every schmuck with a $2 prayer book can come along and fuck up your plan? We've had millions of people praying for the past year to solve serious problems the world is facing right now, and we're still facing them. I have bad news for you. Prayer isn't gonna dig us out of this hole. Science and innovation will. God helps those who help themselves. Whether the separation of church and state was in the Constitution or not, which it is, but even if it wasn't, God is either incapable of or unwilling to solve our problems. So far, religion has done nothing but get in the way of progress.
I'm going to say this, and it may cost me some book sales, but I'm going to say it anyway. Thank God we have a president like Donald J. Trump who understands that.
Oh my god, this dude is so fucking annoying. There's something about the voice that's just awful. It's like everything he says is whiny. I can't put my finger on it, but it's insufferable.
Thank God we have a president like Donald J. Trump who understands that. I don't like seeing my friend under attack like he is under right now. But I don't like the prospect of what's going to happen in America if we allow the left to seize control of this country again. And I believe one of the great ironies of history is going to be this. When the historians look back, they are going to say with great surprise that it was a secular billionaire real estate tycoon from New York City who became the most pro-life, pro-religious liberty, and pro-Israel president in history. Now, that's what I believe.
You know the most interesting thing about this? Why are Christians so pro-Israel? That's kind of weird, right? They're Christians. Isn't that basically supporting what they view as a false religion? It'd be like a Christian pastor getting up there and getting his congregation to vote for a president because he supports Islam in Saudi Arabia. What the fuck is going on? Well, there is an explanation to this. It's because Christians like this believe in a biblical doctrine called Christian Zionism. It's a belief that the return of the Jews to the Holy Land and the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948 were in accordance with Bible prophecy. For Armageddon to come, Israel has to have statehood. Oh yeah, they think they'll be the first to go when Armageddon starts. They think it's a false religion. They think they're wrong, and they're gonna pay for it. But they want a president who'll support Israel because they think they're helping to fulfill a Bible prophecy. Which, by the way, is the reason why most Republican politicians are openly pro-Israel. It's another pandering technique to win over evangelical votes. This guy is renowned for being a monster. This isn't even the worst shit he's said. Not by a long shot. He's always on Fox News preaching doomsday stuff. It gets pretty disturbing when you really start digging into it. Anyways, that's all I've got for you. If you like what I do and you want to see me continue to do it, you can support me in a few ways. First, there's Patreon. That's probably the best way. But if you want to get something back for your support, you can check me out on Teespring, or you can check me out on Etsy. I have a store where I sell all kinds of interesting stuff.
In 2012, Intel was the first in the industry to manufacture three-dimensional transistors called FinFETs, in which the
Hello. An interesting video today. Last week we had a video about chimp and human DNA. There was a part of that video where I very briefly talked about where this 99% similarity came from. Now, I didn't go into much detail, so I think a lot of people may not have understood it. Then I found this video here which perfectly allows us to talk about it, so I decided this would be a good opportunity. As usual, this is a creationist video and he tries to make the argument that humans and chimps are not so similar after all. Let's have a look.
The idea that human and chimp DNA overlap by 98 to 99% has been widely used to promote the idea that humans and chimps shared a common ancestor millions of years ago. But have you considered how they came up with this estimate? For starters, let's look at the size of each genome. While estimates of the exact size of our genome has varied over the years, the last count has it at 3.097 billion base pairs. But the chimp genome is much larger, at 3.231 billion. This means that chimps have at least 130 million more base pairs than we have.
Your graph there really isn't to scale now, is it? You portray it as if the chimp has so many more base pairs when in reality it's less than 5%. Alright, whatever. As scientists, we don't get deceived by poorly created graphs. No sir, definitely not. You know, here's the thing. Two species, no matter how related they are, aren't going to have the same amount of nucleotides. Heck, even individuals of the same species aren't going to have the same. Think of it this way. You and I, we differ in nucleotide count because there are many different types of mutations that could cause the number of base pairs to be dissimilar. I'm sure you've all heard in your high school biology classes about insertions and deletions, but there are plenty of other errors too, such as translocations and transpositions. Different populations already have a different number of nucleotides in their genome. As time passes and these two populations don't interact with each other anymore, the differences continue to build up, since mutations are passed to offspring. And then when thousands and millions of years go by, you can count these mutations. But it's faulty to assume that changes in specific base pairs is the only thing that would differ as time goes on, because we also have entire genomes being added, deleted, reversed, copied, etc. on top of single nucleotide changes. So as time passes, genome lengths will also differ, which is what happened between humans and chimps. So the question now is, how much of that length discrepancy can be attributed to steps of translocations, transpositions, insertions, or deletions? Say, for example, we had 10 translocations that is attributed to the length difference. That is very different than having 100 translocations to reach the same. Does that make sense?
So, how is it possible that our DNA is 98% similar to theirs when the chimp genome is actually 4.3% larger than ours? Right out of the gate, you can see there's something wrong with the sweeping 98% estimate that's frequently used.
Okay, we'll get to the actual explanation later after I let this creationist attempt to explain it first. But right now, I will say, yes, it does seem a little suspicious, doesn't it? And you know, when you come across a scientific concept that doesn't make sense, it's important to go out and figure out why that is the case. Why is it that 99% was reported when there's an entire 4% segment of DNA that chimps have and humans do not? My first impression, if looking at this from fresh eyes, would be to assume that scientists use some sort of measuring system that is well defined but not exactly intuitive at first. In science, there are plenty of instances of using scientific scientific measuring methods or terminology that would need a bit of time to understand and is used specifically in the scientific community. And that is actually exactly what is happening here. There are plenty of examples of this. For example, many people, especially creationists, do not understand what the meaning of entropy is, and they think it's something similar to chaos, when in reality it is not and is much more specific. Same thing here. Percent similarity or percent identity is not what you normally would understand it as, and instead has a specific definition in bioinformatics, which we will go over later. Later.
They came up with this figure by cherry-picking only the sections of our DNA that overlapped with theirs.
You absolutely cannot call it cherry picking. It's common practice to have ground truth to compare with, because nucleotide by nucleotide comparison is straightforward and the algorithms like it, so it's easy to get a sense of differences. Large genome changes, not so much. But of course, it's not like we use percent similarity or identity as much as you'd think anyway. You think the only piece of evidence we have for chimp and human evolution are substitution mutations? Absolutely not. Our measuring systems take everything into consideration, and we use multiple different scoring systems. Percent similarity is one of them. Percent identity is another. In fact, I would say that 99% similarity between humans and chimps is actually one of the last things we use to conclude ancestry and draw patterns of human evolution.
One of the things that not many people know about this study is that large sections of DNA from both the human and the chimp genome were left out when making this comparison. Let's see how Minute Earth, a secular training site that holds to an evolutionary perspective, describes it.
Okay, I'm not going to play the segment with Minute Earth's clip because I don't want to risk them giving me an automatic copyright claim, which many large channels do. Not saying Minute Earth does it, but I just don't want to take the risk and then edit my video again after it's been uploaded. But it is a good video, so I recommend checking it out. They're pretty good at explaining difficult scientific concepts and easy to understand terminology. That's honestly something I need to work on. But anyway, basically yes, there are plenty of segments that are excluded because they do not match each other on both the human and the chimp side. Percent similarity is only possible if we don't look at entire segments that appear in one organism and not in the other. Our algorithms that calculate this would count those as gaps. Let me briefly explain. There's a process called alignment in which you take one DNA and compare it to another. Now, we have multiple different alignment algorithms, but they are all quite robust. To compare entire genomes, you would want to use a global aligner, which does a better job at end-to-end comparisons and punishes gap extensions more heavily than gap existence. Anyway, when you do an alignment between human and chimp genomes, you get a result that includes a lot of different measuring factors. Percent similarity is one of them, and in case you don't know this already, and I realized I didn't explain this yet, percent similarity counts the exact nucleotide differences for those that are aligned together. But a small note, it also rewards matches that produces the same amino acid product, whereas percent identity does not. But anyway, ultimately you want to look at the alignment as a whole to determine relationships. Just looking at percent similarity is often not very helpful when drawing a phylogenetic tree. So in other words, we present this percent similarity to the general public because it is easy to show and easy to present. But in the scientific community, it is just one out of many scoring systems used. And honestly, in my opinion, is pretty useless by itself, although it could give somewhat of an idea of species to species relationships. You have to look at the alignment as a whole to get the best picture. You can see this creationist is now purposely portraying percent similarity as if it is everything scientists use, but that is simply not the case and is the biggest flaw within the argument.
Ignoring 18% of the chimp genome and 25% of the human genome. That's a lot to ignore. In fact, this represents hundreds of millions in each side of the comparison.
Honestly, it's not even that much to ignore. If you compare the human genome to other species that are less related, chances are you will find much greater differences in length. But of course, you can't just look at length to determine ancestry because evolution can both add and delete nucleotides at any point in time. So that can throw a lot of things off. That's why we have these algorithms that look for patterns and from them determine the change. For example, let's say we have one segment of DNA from humans, but that one segment appears twice in chimps. Minute Earth says that this is ambiguous as to if we should count this as thousands of changes equal to the number of base pairs or just one change. But I think it is pretty clear. It is one change because it is caused by one mechanism. So going back to the example, if we see this again, but say in another organism and has this segment repeated 3 times, then that is 2 changes. Algorithms have to be smart enough to recognize things like this and determine a proper scoring system. Obviously, this is much more difficult than counting single nucleotide mutations, but it is necessary. We also can't create algorithms that are biased towards a certain standard compared to another, which is why this is so challenging. But getting back to the point, just saying there are length differences does not undermine the relatedness between 2 species, because large changes in genomes can easily occur. 25% of the genome sounds like a lot until you consider the fact that this could have been done by just a handful of translocations.
Pringles wavy, with a big crunch and totally different flavors. They're not really Pringles. Just like that's not really Daddy.
Yes, it is.
right?
Pringles Wavy. Big crunch, big flavor.
97% of scientists forget to start their presentations with a simple hello. 83% of tech entrepreneurs cannot correctly identify a smile. And each year, 23 students in STEM majors die from boredom. We may have made up those statistics, but Hello SciComm is here to change them. We combine scientific understanding with comedic expertise to help STEM professionals be 99% more compelling. We will streamline your website, energize.
Could the sections they left out be responsible for coding most of the obvious differences we see between humans and chimps? It certainly makes sense that just counting up the number of genetic changes doesn't really tell us that much about how similar or different two creatures are.
Yeah, I can see why Minute-Earth included that in their explanation, but I didn't find it to be too useful in proving their point. Yes, just counting mutations itself is not useful when considering phenotype differences. Large amounts of differences could account for tiny changes, while single nucleotide changes could contribute to great differences. But in terms of determining evolution ancestry, that doesn't really matter. Mutations will generally happen at the same rate, no matter if these changes affect phenotypes at all. So just looking at DNA itself and not its impact on the organism is technically enough.
Indeed, human DNA and gene-level comparisons are frequently made to other mammals, such as mice, cows, and even dogs with high levels of overlap. And we are obviously quite different from these animals.
No, we're actually a lot more similar than you'd think. Yeah, maybe some people would look at these organisms compared to humans and think we are incredibly dissimilar, but that's because you fail to take into account many of the basic things we take for granted that should also be counted. For example, the composition of cells, organs, systems, the fact that we have eyes, a vocal cord, things like that which you wouldn't really consider unless you took a big step back and thought about it. And if you accumulate everything together, you'll realize we're actually so similar to dogs and other mammals.
The fact is, the human and chimp genomes code for two completely different creatures. While both are mammals based on scientific criteria, God made man in his image and gave him a soul that is eternal. Chimps, which are soulless tree-dwelling animals, and humans, which are eternal souls wrapped in bodies that have vastly different capabilities than all animals.
I always thought the Christian view of humans is so narcissistic. Yeah, I guess humans are great, but seriously, in objective standards, we're not any better than other animals. We just evolved differently with a focus on developing intelligence. If humans didn't have our brains, we'd get absolutely wrecked by other animals, let's be honest. It always cringes me a little when creationists say humans are designed specially and has a soul whereas animals do not. It's kind of like that one friend that brags about himself too much. You're not that special.
Being made in the image of God and charged with taking care over God's creation would mean that humans would have several distinctions from chimps. Let's take a look at just some of them. First, humans are the only living thing on the planet that has a conscience and a sense of morality.
That is wrong. There are plenty of animals that show morality, ethics, and a general care for each other. Okay, I'm not going to get into the rest of the video because it's no longer talking about the DNA topic we were so interested in. So yeah, I shall end the video here. I guess the moral of this video is, you're not special. Except me, of course. I'm pretty special.
Jehovah's Witnesses released a new video about the quote-unquote gay lifestyle choice. So how do they feel about the LGBT community? Let's give it a watch and see what they had to say. Let's get into it. Before we get into it, I just want to mention a couple of things. If you've already heard this before, then skip forward about 30 seconds. If you like what I do and you want to see me continue to do it, you can support me in a few ways. First, there's Patreon. That's probably the best way. But if you want to get something back for your support, then you can check out my Teespring or my Etsy store. I sell all kinds of cool stuff on there. Mostly it's 3D printed game and controller stands, but I also sell some signs to stave away the Jehovah's Witnesses. And I sell these dumpster fire candle holders. I sell green, blue, and black, and I sell plain-faced ones or 2021s. I have a bunch of other stuff on there, so give it a look. I might have something that catches your eye. Okay, with all that being said, let's take a look at Jehovah's Witnesses' newest video. For context, we're about to listen to Stephen Lett. He's a governing body member famous for talking with a specific type of cadence. You'll see what I mean in a second. Let's give it a listen.
There'll be many others who will come back who will have to abandon their former way of life. I was thinking, as an example, a homosexual. Now, this former homosexual comes back in the resurrection, and he really thought, and he was taught, and he came to believe that God accepted him with that lifestyle. But now he's going to learn about Jehovah's moral standards.
Let me give a little background on their beliefs. They believe that Armageddon will come any 5 minutes now. They've been saying this since 1914, and there have been a couple of times where they've set a hard date and changed all their literature to stop saying the end is near and start saying the end is here, like the year 1975. They used to have a saying, stay alive to 75. And when nothing happened, they retroactively went back and changed the literature to seem less like a hard claim and more like an implication. So the belief is that Armageddon will be here any second, and God's going to take out anybody who isn't a baptized, active, door-knocking Jehovah's Witness. If you die in Armageddon, then it's over for you permanently. But after Armageddon, they think there's going to be a resurrection of the righteous and the unrighteous. And the unrighteous will have one more shot at doing the right thing. They're going to be resurrected into perfect bodies. There won't be any more disabilities, mental or physical. And at that point, people obviously won't be able to deny that God's real and Jehovah's Witnesses were right. But if that's the case, then I'm really not sure why God can't just reveal himself to us now. Don't people say that it wouldn't be faith if he revealed himself? It doesn't count if you know he's real, and that's why he doesn't reveal himself? Doesn't the post-Armageddon resurrection kind of nullify that? Anyways, Stephen Lett is saying here that after Armageddon, when people are resurrected, except the ones who died in Armageddon and a few randos like Judas Iscariot or Adam and Eve, they're going to have one more chance to live their lives the right way, quote unquote. And this time they're starting out on a level playing field. They know God exists because he resurrected them, and they have perfect bodies and minds. Now that we have that context, let's listen to the last clip one more time.
Now, this former homosexual comes back in the resurrection, and he really thought, and he was taught, and he came to believe that God accepted him with that lifestyle. But now he's going to learn about Jehovah's moral standards. And he's going to learn that Jehovah will not lower his standard to accommodate us. We have to come up to Jehovah's standard. Will he change? Will he adjust? It'll be up to him. But you, brothers and sisters, will help such ones.
See, this is why I have a real problem with people calling it a lifestyle. It's either a choice or it's the result of a brain state. If it's a choice, then it seems like something straight people would be able to choose if they wanted, right? I can't speak for Stephen Lett or anybody else, but personally, I never chose to be straight. I just am. Science tells us it isn't a choice anyways. It's a brain state. It's an identity. It's who you are, for better or worse. And since we know for a fact that it's a brain state, that means that within Jehovah's Witnesses doctrine, it's considered an imperfection. God fucked up, according to Jehovah's Witnesses. If it's a defect in the human body, then when they're resurrected, that defect would be corrected, and it wouldn't be a problem. The root of the problem is the fact that Jehovah's Witnesses are ignoring or outright denying science. But honestly, that's not new information. They've been doing that since the day the religion started. So what are the consequences for choosing to be gay after being resurrected? Let's continue watching.
But now, what if someone refuses to make the necessary changes? Well, the Watchtower commented on that. It said, after being given ample time, maybe even 100 years.
Notice he's not quoting the Bible, he's quoting the Watchtower. They're treating their own propaganda magazines as equally as credible as the Bible. In fact, in a book titled Crisis of Conscience, written by a previous governing body member, Ray Franz, he says one of the concerning things he saw happening was the fact that people were referencing old Jehovah's Witness literature instead of the Bible. They say their doctrine is based on the Bible, but it isn't. It's based on the opinions of 8 old dudes in New York. And they aren't quoting a simple, obvious, cut and dry doctrine. It's very specific. Let's continue.
It said, after being given ample time, maybe even 100 years, to seek God, some will show that they refuse to practice righteousness. Justly, they will lose life in the new world, as we can see from Isaiah 65, verse 12, which says, and the sinner will be cursed, even though he is 100 years of age.
So they think members of the LGBT community are living the way they live because they choose to. It's just something they want to do. And if they were resurrected into perfect bodies, it wouldn't take that desire away. Fascinating, right? I think it says something about these guys. Anytime somebody tells me they think it's a choice, I start to wonder if maybe they aren't 100% straight. But this isn't the only thing they've said about the LGBT community. They've released multiple videos on the subject. I covered this next one when it came out, but it's been a while. This isn't a new position they're taking. They've held it for a long time. The last clip was just a reaffirmation of their previously stated position. So let's see what they had to say about it before.
Hi. Would you like to make a donation to the marathon? No, thank you.
The implication behind this scene is that if you don't support the LGBT community, then the world believes you're a monster and they'll hate and persecute you for it. Problem is, they're grossly exaggerating everything. This video is a depiction of a Jehovah's Witness being persecuted for their belief that gay people are wrong and evil. It's just that this doesn't really happen unless a Jehovah's Witness brings it up and tries to start shit over it. But they can't depict that in the clip because it would be painfully obvious who was in the wrong in that case. So they're depicting the Jehovah's Witness being the victim of an unprovoked attack for their beliefs. In reality, nobody would care if she decided not to donate to whatever thing. They have no idea why she's not donating. Maybe she doesn't have the money to put into it. Maybe she volunteers her time or money in other ways. Maybe she doesn't like that specific charity. Anytime I go to a fast food restaurant and they ask if I want to donate $1 to help kids get education or whatever, I say no, because I just so happen to know that Taco Bell keeps a lot of that money. If I want to donate to something, then I'm going to donate directly to the charity. I don't need my money going through multiple sets of hands before it gets to where it's supposed to go. So no, nobody would give a shit if she said she doesn't want to donate to a charity. There are a billion possible reasons. They just needed to set a scene where the people would be persecuted for a really messed up belief, and it wasn't provoked by them directly. Let's continue.
Shall I put it in the bag, or do you want to wear it now? No, thank you.
What's wrong, honey? You got something against them?
Well, no, I don't have anything against him personally.
So what's the problem?
I respect that they have a right to choose their lifestyle, but as a Bible reader,
Excuse me. I'm a Bible reader too. I go to church, and our church is one of the biggest supporters for this marathon. So what are you trying to say?
As if this would ever really happen. They're obviously trying to portray themselves as martyrs, as poor, persecuted people who are unjustifiably attacked for their beliefs. Because persecution boosts a movement. Not only does it instill a sense of honor and loyalty in the people who are already involved, but if it's genuine persecution, then they get sympathy from the outside world too. This is the point of propaganda. This is what makes it so insidious. It's designed to evoke an emotional reaction in people. You see the same thing from evangelical pastors who insist on intertwining politics into their religion. They violate ethics and laws to tell their church members to vote for specific political candidates. And when they're rightfully sued for it, they turn themselves into martyrs. Same thing with the coronavirus situation. They're told to hold their meetings online instead of in person. The perfect opportunity to turn themselves into martyrs. Instead of portraying the situation as it actually is, telling them not to gather in person but to do it online instead, they portray it as the government telling them not to meet at all, and to close down their church permanently, or they'll be arrested. It's emotional fuel for their persecution complex. Now, is this woman from the clip going to righteously stand up for herself and bravely prove to the world that she's not afraid of being persecuted for believing that God is going to take out all the gay people in Armageddon for the bad choices they make, or is she gonna stay quiet? Let's continue.
Displaying courage now will help me display courage in the future. Well, I'm one of Jehovah's Witnesses, and we believe the Bible teaches this is for a man and a woman who are married.
Intolerant people.
Wow, so brave. Honestly, they're completely missing the problem. The point is that people can live their lives however they want, and it doesn't affect you at all. It's just if you aren't living your life as a Jehovah's Witness, then you're a scumbag, you're evil. They've done a lot more on this subject too. This isn't even close to all of it. There's one more video I want to take a look at. This is a Caleb and Sophia video. It's been a while since I covered it, but since we're on the subject, let's take another look.
I drew our family in school today. Carrie drew 2 mommies. My teacher says that all that matters is that people love each other and that they're happy.
But what matters is how Jehovah feels. He wants us to be happy, and he knows how we can be happiest. That's why he invented marriage the way he did.
You mean one man and one woman?
Exactly. Jehovah's standards haven't changed. It's kind of like going on an airplane. What would happen if someone wanted to bring something on the plane that wasn't allowed?
They couldn't go on the trip.
Right. It's the same with Jehovah. He wants us to be his friend and live in paradise forever. But we have to follow his standards to get there.
Now, I've obviously shortened the clip down a little bit, but those are the main parts. It's like they have this weird obsession with how other people live their lives. I can't possibly figure out why it matters. Seriously, think about it. Why does it matter? Aside from the fact that Jehovah's Witnesses just don't like it, and aside from the fact that it's none of their fucking business how people live their lives, why do they care anyways? Why would God care? Ultimately, the partners they choose is one of the most irrelevant things about a person, but this choice is enough to declare them sinners, to force their lifelong friends and family to shun them for the rest of their lives, and to tell them God's going to take them out when Armageddon comes if they don't choose the right type of partner. So to the people who say Jehovah's Witnesses are just nice, harmless people, I disagree. They are destroying lives. They're ending friendships. They're splitting up families, and I won't accept it. Anyways, that's all I've got for you. As I said before, if you like what I do and you want to see me continue to do it, you can support me in a few ways. First, there's Patreon. That's probably the best way. But if you want to get something back for your support,
कैसे हो भाई बहनों मैं हूं अनस और मैं बिल्कुल कॉल सेंटर से नहीं बात कर रहा so get those stereotypes out of your head, all right, ladies and gentlemen, because we're going to talk about Among Us. Now, I love Among Us. I've been playing it with the friends. It's good. It's really brought a lot of communities together.
His head's gonna, oh my, he's gonna wake himself up. His head's falling. Oh, bro. This is our, for those of you watching, it's not paused. He's just that still right now. My man, he's either sleeping or having a really relaxing meditation. Because look at that.
It's a very simple game, and it's a game that I feel, it definitely has longevity, and as long as the developers stick with it, it's gonna be just fine. Now, like most popular things, it's always attracted by a lot of smooth-brained losers out there. And we looked at Among Us hacks that were floating around on YouTube, but this one is something that's affecting everyone regardless of a hack. For those of you who don't know what's going on, Among Us is going through an issue in its public lobbies where they're basically being spammed with users known by Eris Loris, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff. But let's look at the announcement that Among Us posted on their own game. Now, when you fire up Among Us, the MOTD is, due to increased hacking, Among Us is undergoing emergency maintenance. You may see connection issues as servers are updated. I will remove this message when it's done. We are also working on an account system with reporting and moderation features to fight toxicity. We will launch it as soon as it is done sometime in November. Finally, a reminder that Among Us 2 is canceled because they're putting all their effort into Among Us 1. Very, very admirable, very great. So they basically announced that yes, there is a hacking problem. So let's cover what the hacking problem really is, okay? There was a couple accounts that pretty much talked about Eris Loris. Now, here let's look at one from Stinky on Twitter. Good old, I hate it here, I just want to play a simple game. Me too, buddy, me too. Now, in here, the chat in the game was filled with "You're mad, I'm back, subscribe to Eris Loris, vote Trump 2020. Again, don't take that as a fucking political, I have to state that for videos. Discord.gg/TXNT9TC. Now, the thing about it is, that Discord that's been mentioned, I believe it's actually removed by Discord right now for going against their TOS. But you should never just click on any links, because going to Discord inherently isn't unsafe. But when you go to somebody's Discord and they're spamming you with like other links that they'll tell you, you gotta go here to register further in our Discord, those links can be very dangerous. But we'll get to that in due time. Of course, even even one of the developers of the game, Fort Bass, said, so yeah, I'm rolling out the server update, I'm using a faster method than I've done before, it'll impact players more, so they're really scrambling to get this together. Again, remember, Among Us is not a game run by a massive, like, corporation. It's run by a lot of, like, smaller indie developers, people who didn't anticipate that their game would blow up this fast. So understandably, you know, they're really scrambling for all of this. Now, even over here, you can see a much more clear idea where it says, go to YouTube and subscribe to Eris Loris, or we will kill your device, which they can't do from Among Us, by the way, whether you're on mobile or PC, as far as I've seen. And they'll give you a Twitter handle, which we're gonna go to, because this Twitter handle takes us to @ErisLoris. Yes, it's me. Check pinned tweet for correct information. I can't really see a pinned tweet. Was fun while it lasted. Thanks for the fan. Posted a new TikTok. And then basically this account talks about, you know, I get it, it's a troll account, okay? Like, look at it. Whore's Discord. Get off my cock and stop banning my server. No, not at all. Now, what's interesting is on this account, it leads to a YouTube channel. The YouTube channel takes us to Eris Loris, the YouTube channel. I'm not saying, please don't go here and harass. I have to say that over and over in the video again, as per YouTube's terms of services. Don't brigade do anything like that. But as you can see, this account pretty much relies on hacking video games and whatnot. So if you go to one of the oldest videos, Digital Delta Gaming gets the funny knife. If you actually open this up right here, you can see that he gets like likes, but a disproportionately higher amount of dislikes. And he talks about private anti-cheats and all this stuff. And if you go into the video, it's actually footage of actual exploits being performed. So this guy has like full-on exploits that he's bought. This isn't like hackerish. This is like below a script kiddie. Like anybody can buy exploits and pretty much get away with it and get banned in like 48 hours. But I assume the sites he leads to, which is Methamphetamine Solutions, is a website that, again, being behind virtual machines right now, I'm going to click on them. I would never recommend you guys just click on these things. But if you go to their websites, they're cheats for Gary's Mod, Counter-Strike Source, and Apex Legends. Please don't play music on my computer without permission. Thank you very much. But yeah, this is effectively what you got to deal with. Now, if you go to the recent video, Stay Mad, which is blown up, 423,000 views, there's a lot of people affected. I mean, you're looking at 2.3 thousand likes, 27,000 dislikes. You're mad, I'm back, big mad, he's mad, she's mad, big sad. I don't care. Cool. And if you go look at the actual comments, go change. Stop hacking Among Us. I called the FBI. That's not gonna do anything. They ain't caring. They don't care. But if you see, there's always Discord links being tossed around you. Now again, being the fact that I'm behind virtual machines, sure, I can do it. I would never recommend you click on these and go to where the rabbit hole they're putting you down. So let's talk about why this is happening, okay? Anti-cheat. Now, I don't like anti-cheat. I've historically disliked anti-cheat. But if I had to give you a pretty, like, sell-outy analogy real quick, think of it like G Fuel, right? G Fuel is great. I like it, Code Talk, by the way. If you drink a lot of G Fuel, like 10 cups of this in a day, which they don't recommend, I don't recommend, that's a lot of G Fuel in your system. That's a lot of anti-cheat, and it's ultimately detrimental. Like anti-cheat, if you use too much of it and it's too invasive, at the end of the day, the people who are actually going to hack your game are going to get away with it. So what does anti-cheat really do at the end of the day? It harms the average user, like you, me, people who are playing legitimately. It opens our attack surface on our computer relatively high. Now, if you don't use anti-cheat, okay, if you don't go all the way there, then you basically create this laissez-faire community online that anybody can connect to and exploit to their heart's content. When we looked at Among Us hacks, those hacks were running with like memory modifications. The server wasn't doing anything. There was no check and balance to ensure that people couldn't run across the map in a second or always be imposter or kill indiscriminately no matter what. People could basically win games as soon as they were loaded with the Among Us hacks that are still floating around all the way out there. Now, I don't like anti-cheat. I dislike it immensely. But I understand, as a normal person, okay, as a person that realizes that online gaming has problems, you're going to need a little bit of anti-cheat. You're going to need a little bit of that good old G Fuel in your life if you want to stay happy. When you have some of the anti-cheat, right, when you have some of it, it has to be, A, not so invasive, but it has to be enough to ruin the experience for hackers, or at least make it that difficult enough so that a lot of the hackers just decide to go away because the game is relatively well obfuscated, if that makes any sense out there, right? See, the point is with anti-cheat is to create this situation where it's not so bad for the average user, but it's bad enough for the hacker out there. So you can create this environment where it's relatively safe. You can never have a 100% safe online gaming experience unless you were like using Google Stadia or GeForce Now exclusively, where hackers didn't have any access to video game files. We would just have video feeds sent to our computers. That's not practical for competitive gaming yet, but that's one thing you have to understand with anti-cheat. It's a requirement for most of the online experiences we go through. Among Us has none of this, and I can tell you why it has none of this. On Linux, I can fire up Steam right now, and we can fire up Among Us through Proton. Proton usually has many issues with anti-cheat. With something like Among Us, not at all. I'll show you right now. Let's open up Among Us, and I'll show you why it doesn't use anti-cheat. You can just fire it up underneath Proton. To prove to you I'm on Proton, it tells you I'm using Proton 5.0-19, which also isn't even the most latest version of Proton out there. By hitting play, if you look at it real carefully, Among Us will just fire up. Right here, bam, no fucks given. In fact, I can even go right to the online, go right into a public lobby, and I'll show you that it works just fine. Bam, we are, oh, game's tried to join full, goddamn. Here, let's connect to like FAFG real quick. Look at that, I can connect online, no fucks given, okay? Like, bam, it works just out of the box. Now again, that's to show you that there's no anti-cheat sort of screwing up with anything. That's why it's so fucking hackable. Now, this takes us to the next part, okay? The idea of how dangerous it is for you. Right, now at the end of the day, this hack really can't do anything, and it's all up to the Among Us developers to iron this out. It's somebody who's just spamming their link over and over and over again like it's a little smooth brain. Now, the reason why I keep telling you at the beginning, do not click on the link, is I'm going to show you why you shouldn't real quick. Now, this is Panopticlick, which is checking my browser fingerprinting, right? Now, if you look at my browser fingerprinting, I'm on a VPN. My VPN has connected me to Sykes Network in South Korea, in Seoul, right? So I'm, as far as the world knows, my IP is coming out of South Korea. I am a South Korean, right? I'm a Vigil name. But if you go to my actual browser fingerprinting, they can easily bypass that right there. What you may not know is that the browser fingerprinting not only figures out what browser you're using, but it also figures out your operating system, like I'm using Linux x86-64. However, it also notices I've got a resolution of 3440 by 1440, but more importantly, it also identifies my time zone, which is America/Toronto. A lot of people don't obfuscate this, so even if you are hiding your actual location in like America or something else, a browser fingerprint can actually dig up the fact that you do in fact live in a different location from your VPN. And that's why you can correlate VPN users relatively easily if they choose to obscure the information. Of course, I could go into this, I could adjust date and time and settings to, let's say, time zone, let's go to like South Korea, right? And I'll prove to you again. So South Korea, Seoul, hit apply, and we'll change it. There we go. So now we're apparently a South Korean boyo. We're like, it's 10:25 in the following day. Whoa, what happened? Oh no! No! I killed my audio recording, didn't I? Oh no, I didn't. Did I kill the audio recording? Did I? No, I didn't. It screwed with the timing on it. Jesus Christ. Yeah, so see, now it registers me in Asia/Seoul. Again, a very basic change, but one that if you're going to be using a VPN, you may actually want to consider for that extra premium amount of like computer safety. But that being said, there's still a million other ways you can identify actual users. So let's not pretend otherwise. But that being said, ladies and gentlemen, okay, that all being completely tossed out there, Eris Loris is not some crazy big hacker on Among Us. There's somebody that exploited a game that had no anti-cheat to begin with. They are less than a script kiddie, okay? They are a script embryo. And it's all